What's up, everybody? Welcome to a primary source walkthrough. This time we have a very interesting document. I mean, I always say that, but this one's interesting for its own reasons. Anyway, we have NSC 68 and the Ideological Cold War from 1950. Now, before we get into the content here, let's do some things. Let's discuss what this is, what this document, like what is the genre here, so to speak. Let's talk about its context, and then we'll jump into the actual content of the source. So the first thing is, well, what is NSC 68? And what you have to know is that NSC stands for National Security Council. And this is the 68th document that it's produced in this year, I suppose. The National Security Council is a arm of the executive branch of the federal government. It advises the president on issues of, guess what, national security. It is headed by the National Security Advisor, who is analyzing intelligence about threats to the security of the United States, checking up on our allies, those sorts of things. It is a part of the foreign policy apparatus of the United States. The NSC, in the wake of World War II, has a considerable job in front of it. The National Security Council forms itself in 1950, and it forms really in response to two things. Number one, China, the world's largest population by nation, went communist in 1949. And in 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tests the atomic bomb. Now, kind of our worst fears have been realized. That it seems that communism is ascendant in the Eastern Hemisphere, and our chief geopolitical rival, the Soviet Union, now has the same destructive power that we have, the atom bomb. And what's even more distressing is that part of the way that the Soviets got the atom bomb was through espionage and the gathering of secrets from our own scientists. It's a man named Klaus Fuchs, who is the one who is held responsible for giving the Soviets the secret of the bomb that we had sought to keep from them. So, in the immediate aftermath of World War II, the United States government pursues a course of action that can be described and was described as containment. It's not necessarily direct confrontation with the Soviet Union, but the idea is we want to contain the Soviet Union wherever we can. And Harry Truman, the president at the time, preferred to do this through economic means. So, making sure that countries that seem to be on the verge of falling victim to communism or going communist received enough aid so that there wouldn't be that sort of revolution. Make sure that our military is supporting where we can, but the military is kind of a last resort. Now, here in 1950, the NSC, as this document is going to suggest, ups the game. And containment is no longer going to be the way that we challenge the Soviet Union. Instead, we're going to confront them wherever we can. Though, again, this is done through a lot of proxy wars and stuff like that, so it's not like, we're putting boots on the ground and charging at Moscow. Usually not a good idea. In any case, NSC 68 is a document that lays out the reasons why we need to really up the game in terms of this confrontation, and sets the tone as far as, you know, how do we see the world unfolding in light of this new threat. And NSC 68 is a document that you need to take with a grain of salt. It's not propaganda, because this was not meant for public consumption at first. This was a top secret document. It was passed around the government. Our officials read it. Anyone on the NSC obviously read it. But this was not supposed to be for public view. Like, we're not making Donald Duck cartoons out of this. What happened later on is, in the 70s, historians who were researching, how the Cold War begins, pressed, and finally this was declassified. So that's why we have it. So this isn't, this isn't the main message that the U.S. government is putting out to its citizenry. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of the themes here get played out, but this is not something that the public was going to consume. This is something for internal consumption. That said, it is a rather stark picture of the Soviet Union and the meaning of the Cold War. So, with all that context, 7 minutes of it, to set this thing up, let's jump in. And what we notice right away is the document tells us that the world has changed, and we don't know that it's changed for the better. The document talks about some of the empires that have recently fallen, and it also kind of suggests down here where it says the international scene was marked by recurring periods of violence and war, but a system of sovereign and independent states was maintained, over which no state was able to achieve hegemony. Basically, like I say in the marginal comments right there, the world wasn't perfect, but it worked. Now, I would disagree with this because, yes, there was a system of sovereign and independent states, and it was maintained, and no state was able to achieve hegemony over these different empires, but these empires were definitely subjugating other peoples, and this is a little, I don't know. And you think about Woodrow Wilson, and he's talking about self-determination and all that sort of stuff, and he didn't really believe that everyone should be self-determining if they weren't self-determining the way he thought it was supposed to be, or the way that he wanted it to. In any case, so we have this picture of the world, things be changing. Down here, the document is setting up, what are the sides that have emerged, and it's pretty clear where he's going to go. He says the British and French, they have declined. Germany and Japan, they've been defeated. Now it's the United States and the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union is a problem. The document says, second, the Soviet Union, unlike previous aspirants to hegemony, is animated by a new fanatic faith, antithetical to our own, and seeks to impose its absolute authority over the rest of the world. So, in plain English, these bitches be crazy, and they want to take their crazy and make it the way that the world works. They want to take over the world. And they're going to do so by any means necessary. And now, he says, with the development of increasingly terrifying weapons of mass destruction, every individual that or every individual faces the ever-present possibility of annihilation should the conflict enter the phase of total war. So he's saying, look, if we go to direct war, we go into a situation like World War I or World War II, and it's the United States versus the Soviet Union, we both have incredibly destructive weapons, and we will blow up the world, essentially. And you think about the Cold War 1950s and 1960s and the atomic bomb readiness drills, things like duck and cover and all that sort of stuff. I mean, people really lived with the threat of atomic annihilation. I mean, if you play video games, like, you can kind of get the sense of this feeling if you play like Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. That is definitely influenced by the Cold War American culture, and satirizes it to some extent with some problematic things, like, consider that the Brotherhood of Steel, a bunch of Nazis. They're white supremacists. It's not even, I don't even think it's a question. Anyway, that's a topic for another time. Now, the rest of the document presented here, we're not reading the entire NSC 68, but the way that the source reader, one of the source readers that I use, excerpts it, transitions to kind of from setting up the stakes of the war, this possible war. Number one, we have good versus evil. That's what he's setting up here. The document is setting up here. And number two, it is a war that could potentially destroy the world. Now the document transitions into ruminating on the free society, and why it's essentially defining why our side is the good side and why their side is the bad side. So below these 3 stars, that's kind of where this is going. So he sets it up or the document sets it up in a binary, two different sides. The idea of freedom, moreover, it says, is peculiarly and intolerably subversive of the idea of slavery. So we have freedom on one side, slavery on the other. And freedom subverts slavery. But the converse is not true. The implacable purpose of the slave state is to eliminate the challenge of freedom has placed the 2 great powers at opposite poles. It is this fact which gives the present polarization of power the quality of crisis. So we have freedom on our side, slavery on the side of the Soviets. Freedom, the document says, it can completely subvert slavery, but slavery just ruins everything, which, I think we can all get on board with that. Now, the rest of this, the document talks about qualities of the free society. Okay, so why is the free society the good one? And talks about self-discipline and self-restraint and individualism and rights, like these key components of what it means to be an American, classically defined. And this idea of the individual and individualism is such a key part of American society, American cultural thinking. It's no wonder it appears here. Now, as the document continues, there's some really interesting bits down here on this page that I wanted to point out, and it's essentially trying to praise the free market of ideas. So, in this underlined paragraph here, it says, "For the free society does not fear, it welcomes diversity." And what it means here is not diversity like we want people of all races and ethnicities and gender identities and sexual orientations, that sort of thing. No, what it means is ideas. So it derives its strength from its hospitality even to antipathetic ideas. So we even welcome the bad ideas. it is a market for free trade and ideas, securing its faith that free men will take the best wares and grow to a fuller and better realization of their powers and exercising their choice. On the other hand, where the despot, the dictator, holds absolute power, the absolute power of the absolutely powerful will, as all other wills, must be subjugated in an act of willing submission, a degradation willed by the individual upon himself under the compulsion of a perverted faith. So, essentially, the slave state, the Soviet state, no other ideas can exist but the Soviet state. And there's no free trade of ideas. Now, we should criticize this as historians, and we know that the United States has not always been open to other ideas, even if they're bad. So think about World War I, for example, and the Espionage and Sedition Acts, and what happened with Eugene V. Debs. I would say that is a counterexample to this. The American government decides every once in a while that there is a message that is so important that we have to make sure that it gets out by any means necessary. It kind of gets down over here where they're kind of the document is kind of suggesting that there are mortal threats that are exceptions, I guess, but it's difficult to say, and also the United States government does make some interesting choices as far as what they're going to accept as threatening and unthreatening. So, for example, we don't want communists talking according to this document, but we're willing to consider Nazis. That's interesting to me. And I think we see that a little bit in our society today. So, the document portion that we have concludes, thus unwillingly our free society finds itself mortally challenged by the Soviet system. So we have to take care of this threat as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Those are the stakes of the game, so to speak. So what I hope this document has shown you is just how much the United States government considered the Soviet Union a threat. We're talking about freedom versus slavery. We're talking about a potential nuclear annihilation. We are talking about the end of the world here. This is an apocalyptic document. It is setting up an apocalyptic worldview of the world in this Cold War situation, and that is something that we should consider here. That there is kind of this apocalyptic thinking motivating the United States, and seeing the world of the Cold War in stark apocalyptic terms. But how far we want to go down that road, that depends on you. I'm really interested in those sorts of things, and how apocalyptic rhetoric leads to religious change, religious violence, those sorts of things. I could go off on a long tangent, but this thing's already 20 minutes long. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up there. If you have any questions about NSC 68, the Cold War, containment, this new use of hard power, don't hesitate to reach out to me via email, stop by an office hour. More than willing to help you think through this and talk through some of the issues that it might raise for you. And other than that, folks, we'll go ahead and sign off, and make sure you are staying healthy, staying safe, and I'll see you on the next one.